Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today in this video, we will be looking into how you can consume an API in Go, which has authentication header authentication enabled, API key authentication enabled. So let's first see how we can do that using Go. The API we're going to use is this and this API, which every time you call this API endpoint, it gives you some information about random dog images, which we want. So, and the API key for this API is this. So let's see how we can do that in call first. So in order to execute API with authorization key, authorization enabled, what we can do is issue call, and let's put it in a separate line, much easier. And we want the header content type, we want it as JSON, so we want the response in JSON. And also, if you don't know, dash h in call means we're specifying header. And also authentication. Okay, authentication is done by API key, so we just add it here and we provide the URL, which is this. So if we do a if we run the command, we got the response in JSON, and the response has some key value pair in it, which is message and the link where you can actually get the dog's image, and status success. So let's see how we can execute this and download the dog image via using Go. So let's head over to our VS Code. I have opened a VS Code terminal over here. Sorry, VS Code here. At first, we all know we just need a main.go. Let me specify package main. If you don't know what these package main or syntax mean, then it will be a good time to just do a quick revision how Go work and why Go application must have package main and a main function in it. So once I have created this, what I would do is just to make my life easier, generally I create a placeholder. It's really tough to run fmt.printer every single time. I've been born by using Java, I say. So yeah. So let's use this and see if things working fine. API consuming Go. Yeah, using Go. Okay. Let's see if it works. Open the terminal in here and go run main.go. Okay, everything looks fine. Just put a new line. Yep, so everything looks fine. So let's copy this bit, as we want this. We want to instrument our code based on the response. So just put it here for some time. Now let's start with the response. Like, we know the response, we will be getting response in this format, and this format has two key value pairs, message and status. So when we get the response, we need to save it as as part of a struct. So let's create that one first, or we can create it later as well. So let's define the base URL, and the base URL for and the base URL for the API is this. Okay, so once we have the API in place, we will be using HTTP HTTP package in Go, and let's create a new request. We can directly do a SDP default client dot do to initiate a request, but before we create before we do actually do our request, we want to modify the header or add some more header parameters like authorization and content type. So let's prepare a new request, and you can do that using http.new request. And if you hover over it, it says what kind of method are we going to use on this request, and the URL and body IO reader. Since we are doing a get request, it would be http.method get, and the URL would be the URL that we defined above. And since we don't want it, we don't want the body, so let's put it nil. Okay, now we have prepared our new request, and we shall execute it. But before we run the request, we need to add some header, which now this parameter, if you see this method, it returns request and error. So let's capture it. Error. Yeah, so and whenever something returns an error, it's a good practice and go to do a error checking. So let's do a check log. Make it much easier. Log the printf. Now if I do log f and could not prepare a new request, and we want the error to be displayed if something went wrong. So we did the error checking, and now what we need to do is add the header in the request. Make it much smaller. Okay, now what we did here is we defined the URL and we prepared a new request, and we need to add a new header to the request. You can add new header to the request using request dot header dot add. And since we want the content type to be application slash JSON, since we want the data to be returned in JSON format, we add a new header called content type, and its value is application JSON. And similarly, we would be doing the same for authorization header as well. So authorization, and the value it would take is API key. Yeah, generally you would concat them, and this value would be good. It is good practice to pull it from the environment variable, save it something like API key and pull it from the environment variable. For now, I'm just putting it here. It's not a big deal. You can just Google it. So now once we have prepared the request and then add a new header to it, it's time to actually run the request or execute the request. The way you can do that in HTTP package is http.defaultclient.do. So if you hover over it, it says what it does. It sends an HTTP request and returns a HTTP response. Now the parameter it takes is sorry, the argument that it takes is a request, and since we have prepared a request, we just pass it here. Now we ran the request, right? And now it returns a response as well. So it returns a response and error. Let's capture it. Response error. Okay, and similar to above, we do some error handling, and this time could not perform a new request. So now we did the request, we got the response as well, right? Now the next thing that we need to do is, this response has a lot of unwanted data. Like if you just add, it shows you it has body, headers, status, and status code as well. But the only thing that we need is a response. We need is whatever we got on the body, which is this bit. So let's, the way you can do that is using ioutil read all. So I will call ioutil dot read all and pass the response dot body. So what it does is it reads from the response body and returns you a byte, like, sorry, it reads from the response and returns the data it read. So we want it to be saved as response bytes comma error. As we can see it, sorry, as we can see it returns an error and byte. So let's capture it or save it. Now similar again, if there is an error, you just do us error handling, much easier. It's a could not read response body. Okay, so let's revise what we did till now. We defined the URL, we prepared the new request, added headers for authorization and content type, and then we executed that request. Now that request came with a lot of output, and that request gave us a response, and that response had a lot of information, but we only wanted the body, whatever is in the body. So we captured that and save it into a response bytes file. Now until now everything is good. Like if we try to print it, we will not see anything interesting. Now the data returned in here is something like this, but in byte. Now we need to make sure whatever data is returned is saved it as part of a structure. The way you can do that is, let's first define a type struct. Type, we just want it a dog. So this structure is, this is our custom data type, which will hold message and status, which both of them would be string. Let's make it JSON friendly, sorry, API friendly, using message and status. That's good. So we created a custom data type, and what we want to do is, whenever we get the response, we want it to map in this data type. So we have created a data type. Now in order to map the response we got into that data type, we create a new variable called dog of type dog, which is the struct we defined. And the way to map the response, JSON response, to a structure, or custom data type is called in is called unmarshaling. So what we are going to do is use JSON dot unmarshal, and if you see, unmarshal takes a byte and an interface. So we already have the response byte here, and also we have created a new interface called doc. But you can see it all only returns an error. So you like this, we don't need to save the data somewhere anywhere. So you can just parse it as part like this, and if there is an error, you just write it could not marshal JSON response byte. This be error. Okay, we did the error handling as well. So what this does is it unmarshals the response we got into the variable dog here of type struct. Now if we print dog, let's see what we get. So since we have unmarshaled it, we now it is mapped into this structure. So we want the dog.message. If we run go main.go, it will give us the URL of the dog, right, which is what we want. So let's create a variable called file URL, and we want only that part of the response. Let's convert it to string. Okay, now we know this is the endpoint where we can download, or this is the endpoint of the dog image. So in order to do another request, we can just do http://get and pass in the file URL to just download, do another get request to download this file. We didn't do new request because now we don't have to modify any header or add any header. And if you hover over it, it shows you what response we're going to get. So we're going to get a response like previously, and also an error. So let's just save it, capture the response and error. And since we got the error, it's good to do error handling. Couldn't perform request to file readable. Now whenever you do a request, it is a good behavior to defer, like just close the request, close the response. So just defer it. And now what we need to do is, we got the response from the file, right? We have to write that response to a file, and in order to write the response to a file, we need to create a file in this location, and then write that response to that file. So in order to create a file in Go, you use os.create, which creates a file. Let's name it doc.jpg. Now this os.create as well, it takes a string file name, and in response it gives you a output, or it gives you a file and error. So error. And when you open a file, it's good to close it immediately. Now so if we run it, what will happen is it will create a doc.jpg image so doc.jpg file, but it is empty. There's nothing on it. So what we need to do is we need to write this response to this file. So how you can do that is using io.copy. So what this does is it copies it copies from source to destination. So what we want to do is we want, if you just read destination source, so we want to copy anything from response body to our out this file. So sorry, this file. So whatever we got when we did uh, get request, and we only need the body out of it. So we copy anything from the response body to the file. Now if you hover over it, you can see it gives you the status like written and error, but we don't need anything since we just want to copy it. So we will ignore the written message, and we only check the error. Sorry, we're not creating a variable. Okay, now let's do another set of error checking. This could not copy bytes to the output file. Okay, so now if let's just delete this, and now if we run the program, it should create a OS file and copy the response body we got from our HTTP request into that file. And you can see we just downloaded the file. So this is how you consume API in Go. So let's revise what we did. So we defined the URL, we prepared a new request, and we added some headers since we required we had to add authorization key, and also we want the response in JSON, so we added new headers. We performed the request, captured the response, and the response from the response we only wanted the body, so we use ioutil to only fetch the body response body and save it into a response bytes, save it as a byte. Now this response needs to be mapped to our custom structure data type. So we create a variable and use JSON unmarshaling to map the response to our structure. Now once we got the data, we only wanted the message key value pair, and as that contained the URL of the doc. So we fetched that and did another request and captured the response, similar to which we created a file on where we want to copy our response pipe and response body. We copied the response body to the created file, and that's how we got the dog image. Okay, so that's all. That this is how you can consume an API in Go. So I hope this tutorial was useful and you were able to follow along. Please do let me know if you have any issues or if you faced any issues while doing this. So that's all for today. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.